In this video clip, I'm going to look at the didactics of intervals. So first of all, I'm going to look at a couple of general things that you need to keep in mind and that you need to tell your learners. So first of all, you always need to teach intervals before you get to triads because you need that knowledge in order to understand triads. Then also very important, give your learners a practical experience, a practical understanding of what intervals are. And of course, a great way to do that is to use the solfège system. You can also use associations. You look at melodies, the opening two notes, and then you have associations for the various intervals. Then the next thing that you need to tell them, an interval must always stay exactly the same. So if you have a fifth, it must stay a fifth. For example, you have G to D sharp. So that's an augmented fifth. So you can't go and enharmonically change the D sharp to an E flat because, of course, then you're going to have a -6. Okay, so you're not allowed to change notes enharmonically. And then also, you're never allowed to change any of the given notes unless it is required. Another thing to really make them aware of is that they look at the key signature and also any accidentals that might precede a specific note. So that's specifically if you have an interval within a music composition that they ask you. Okay, and then the next thing, tell them what an interval is. So an interval is the distance between two notes. Now, let's have a look at this distance. The first thing that you need to tell your learners is that they always need to count the notes from the bottom. So if you look at this example, if you count from F to B flat, you're going to start counting from the F. So it's F, G, A, B, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, because in maths, they would typically start counting from the next note. So that is not going to work for intervals. Then another thing is, and this is the next thing that you need to tell them, that we have two groups of intervals. We have our group of perfect intervals, and then we have our group of major intervals. So this is the easiest method to show that to them. You're going to tell them to draw a castle. So there you can see I have a castle. Then the next thing is you're going to number the various corners of this castle. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you are going to circle the bottom group and you're going to circle the top group. So your bottom group are your intervals that belong to the group of perfect intervals, and then of course the top one is your group of major intervals. Really the easiest way to show that to your learners. Okay, then when it gets to the different qualities of your groups, you are going to explain it as follows. So use your hands when you teach the quality of intervals. Yeah, and I'm going to show you how I do it. So say, for example, we have a perfect fifth. Okay, so let's say we have F to C. Then if we're going to change it, if we want to make it augmented and say we're working with a top note, we are going to make it bigger by a semitone. Okay? Or what we can do, if we want to make it diminished, so we have perfect, and if we go one semitone down, one semitone smaller, in other words, it becomes diminished. And you also do that for your group of major intervals. So you would have major, an augmented major interval semitone bigger, okay? Or you have major semitone smaller, minor, another semitone smaller, you have diminished. So this method really works well. It also works well in an exam. You can teach your learners to use their fingers. So Say, for example, there you have perfect, there you have diminished, you have perfect, you have augmented. Okay, very easy way. Now, on this note, I would just like to comment on two other approaches. So the one approach, and I've written this on the board, is to tell your learners that you've got a perfect interval, so for example, and then a semitone to the left, you've got diminished, or a semitone to the right, you have augmented. Now, this approach really works well if you only work with the top note, but it's not going to work when you work with a bottom note, because they're going to think of augmented as, going bigger, making it sharp. And that's not going to be the case if you are working with the bottom note, because if you're going to add a sharp there, you're actually making it smaller. So that's why I definitely don't recommend using that approach. Then another approach is to count in semitones, but that's a lot of work. It's a lot of rote learning, and that method really leaves a room for quite a bit of error. So rather don't use that method. Okay, then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you're going to teach them to work out an interval. And I'm going to just quickly look at this example on the board. So say, for example, the question says a minor third above the A. So first of all, you are going to write your third. Then the second step is you're going to ask yourself, what is this note's relation to A? Now, I just forgot something here. So you have to tell them you always regard the bottom note as the tonic of a major. Okay, that is the way you work it out. You never think of a minor. Okay, so you always regard the bottom note as the tonic of a major. Okay, so now you ask yourself, does A major have a C? Then the answer is no. A major has got a C sharp. So if the answer is no, let's start with yes. So if the answer was yes, it means depending in which group of intervals it falls, it's either going to be a perfect interval or it's going to be a major interval. But in this case, the answer is no. So A major does not have a C, it's got a C sharp. Then the next question is, so how is this interval different, to what I would have in A major? So it is a semitone smaller, because A major's got a C sharp, semitone smaller is normal C, C natural, and that would be a minor third. Of course, you're basically using the same method if a particular interval is given. Okay, so if it was given, you also ask yourself, does A major have a C? Answer, no, it's got a C sharp. How is it different to C sharp? It's a semitone smaller. Okay, then the next thing is we're going to look at how to teach them writing an interval below a given note. Okay, so say, for example, the question states an augmented fourth below the D. So there is my fourth, and now you're going to basically follow the same steps that we just did. So you ask yourself, does A major have a D? The answer is yes, okay? So now they want an augmented fourth, okay? So A to D is a perfect fourth. So to make it augmented, you have to make this, the interval bigger by a semitone, which means you will have to add an A flat. Okay, as easy as that. Then the next thing that I would like to just quickly talk about is your compound intervals. So tell your learners it's very easy. A compound interval is any interval bigger than an octave. Now, to work it out, obviously you have to count it. So say we have something like a major 10th. Did I write this one on the board? No, I did not, but we can always just quickly do it. So let's take, for example, F to the A. Okay, so they want a major tenth above the above F. Or they give that interval to you and they ask you what interval is it. Okay, so you have to do the counting. But now, to make it easy in terms of to which group of intervals it belongs. So does it belong to the group of perfect intervals or does it belong to the group of major intervals? So what you do is you're going to do a very simple calculation. You're going to subtract 7 from your interval. So 10 minus 7 is going to give you 3. Okay, so if you work with, say, an 11th, then you also subtract 7 from that, you're going to get to a 4th, so meaning you're working with your group of perfect intervals, and then it's easy to work out the quality from there. Then the next thing is inversion of intervals. So show them, okay, and play to them. First of all, you tell them you basically have your interval, and then to invert it, you literally either need to take the top note and put it above the top note. What did I just say? The bottom note and put it above the top note, or you have to take the top note and you put it at the bottom. Okay, the answer is going to be the same. It's just going to be an octave higher or lower, of course. Okay, so then what you tell them when you do this, so I wrote this example here on the board. So we have F to D sharp, which is an augmented 6. Okay, so if I invert it, the D sharp now is moving down there. Of course, you could also have moved the F up. Okay, either way, you're going to have D sharp to F. So now to work out the quality, it's very easy. So you tell them when you, so 6 is going to become a third. That's a given. I mean, if you're just going to swap the two notes around, that's what's going to happen. But now in terms of the quality, you need to tell them, so augmented always becomes diminished. Major always becomes minor, and vice versa, of course. And perfect remains perfect, okay? So it's very easy to just say, oh, okay, this is now going to become a diminished third. But imagine we didn't do this. They gave you this interval, okay? And now I'm going to show you how to simplify this interval. Let's say they gave you this interval and they ask you what interval is it. So that's difficult because we don't have such a key as D sharp major. So what you need to tell your learners, you are going to keep the same letter names, but you're either going to move the whole interval a semitone up, or you're going to move the whole interval a semitone down. Okay, so then our quality stays exactly the same. So what I did here is I moved everything a semitone down. So F sharp, D sharp became D, F became F flat. Very important here to tell them they're not allowed to change it enharmonically, okay? Because F flat is weird, okay? So we want to change it into E, okay? But we never change an interval enharmonically. Okay, so now you ask yourself, does D major have an F flat? Okay, so we work with our group of major intervals because it is a third. Okay, so now we ask ourselves, does D major have an F flat? Oh no, it doesn't. It's got an F sharp. Okay, so you know, how is it different to this F sharp in terms of quality? Okay, so if D to F sharp is major, D to F natural is minor, and then D to F flat is diminished. And there you go. Then just one last thing that I'm going to quickly tell you, and this is really very easy, and that is to tell your learners an interval can either occur in its harmonic form or its melodic form. So all the intervals that I've written here on the board are harmonic intervals. In other words, it's written like harmony. It's one note on top of the other note. Then, of course, if we have, say, for example, something that looks like this, it is a melodic interval, okay, because it's like a melody, one note after the other. Just something to make them aware of when it gets to melodic intervals. If the first note is higher than the second note, remind them you always work from the bottom note to the top note. So we're going to work from the E to the B in order to work out the quality and the distance. And that's basically it in terms of the didactics of intervals.